Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the VBC Bible Institute and podcast, and welcome to the Sunday School Hour for Victory Baptist Church, where we're kind of combining these two ideas and using the Sunday School Hour for the VBC Bible Institute. There's positives and there's negatives in doing this. The positives is if I do anything with the Bible Institute for a church hour, like Sunday school, Sunday morning, or Sunday night, then I feel like I have to stay continuing to do it for church time to ensure all the individuals of the church get to hear that teaching from its start to its conclusion. So we've kind of started Genesis chapter 4 for the church, so now I feel like I have to continue it through those times. That's the negative, because that delays the speed in which I can make it through that subject, because I've got to wait from Sunday to Sunday or, Wednesday to Wednesday, whatever the case may be. But right now, with everything and COVID-19 messing up the whole world, like everything is all mixed up and messed up anyway. So, whatever works. The bottom line is VBC Bible Institute. We're doing a survey of the whole Bible, a journey through the Bible. We're in Genesis. We're never going to finish Genesis. That's okay. I'm glad I called it a journey through the Bible. I am so glad that I did not call it a survey of the Bible, because clearly this is not being done as a survey. This is being done as a literal journey through the Bible, and we're in Genesis chapter 4. That's where we're going to be. So hopefully people are appreciating the depth in which we are going. All right. We're not going as in depth maybe as we should, but that would turn into a verse by verse study of the entire Bible. I don't know. Some will say you're pretty much already at a verse by verse study of the whole Bible the way you're going. I don't know. I think we're moving relatively quick. We'll see. It's hard to know. The bottom line is, are we learning something? Are we accomplishing anything in trying to do this? And I think we are. A couple of things I would remind everyone of. If you are participating and you haven't completed your Satan assignment, well, you're way behind. You're way behind. If you haven't completed your assignment on Genesis chapter 4, you're not really behind yet, but you're getting there. So get those assignments done. For those who are not doing the assignments, all right, you don't have anything to do. You're just listening. So okay, I think you're missing out, but that's okay. I can't show up at everyone's house I can't get the statistics from the podcast and go, oh, wait, someone was listening here. I'm going to get in my car and drive to their house and say, hey, you didn't do your assignment. No. But the assignments are there to try to help people gain more from their study and really take a journey through the Bible in a way that will really benefit them. But with all of that said, here we are, Genesis chapter 4. Now, one of the reasons you have to kind of go slow through the book of Genesis is because Genesis, and I know you know this, there's nothing unique about what I'm about to say. Genesis is a foundational book. It lays the foundation for all the doctrines and theology that's going to come after. We've already seen that. Without Genesis' explanation of sin and how sin entered into the world, the book of Romans makes absolutely no sense. That's going to happen over and over and over again. Other parts of the Bible are going to rely on what's taught in Genesis in order to build its teaching and its doctrine. Paul uses what happens in Genesis to build the doctrine of sin. So he assumes that you're going to understand Genesis, and it treats Genesis obviously as literal history. But because Genesis is so foundational, when we come across topics, we have to stop and go, wait a minute, this is really the first time in the Bible where this subject is dealt with, and we're going to have to make sure we have this down, because we're going to develop an idea, a theology of it later on. And we're going to have to ensure that we understood it from Genesis. If you get the foundation wrong, I mean, we all know this. If you get the foundation wrong, whatever you build on top of it is going to be in trouble. It's going to collapse because you got to get that foundation right. It's got to be secure. It's got to be perfect, because if it's not, well, you're going to do a lot of building that's probably going to have to be tore back down to try to repair the foundation. And we don't want to do that. So Genesis is so important in that. And I'm stressing that because today we come to really a subject that I don't know if people's understanding, I think everyone has an opinion about the subject, and I don't know if their opinion is biblical or if their opinion is more rooted in how they were raised, based on how they were raised. And so, because you'll hear a lot of people talk about this subject going, well, when I was younger, back in my day, we had a different attitude towards this subject than the young kids of today who are destroying the world. I mean, these kids, that whole old person talking about the young people, and it's an age thing. It's not a theology thing. It's not theological. It's just a generational gap, and they don't get how the young people perceive things, and they condemn it. Now, what older people have a tendency to do is the older way of thinking somehow is the biblical way of thinking, and the young way of thinking is clearly the unbiblical way of thinking. Well, whenever you try to use the Bible to justify your way of thinking, you're almost always in trouble, because you shouldn't use the Bible to justify your way of thinking. The Bible should be the source of the way you think. If you have to run to the Bible to try to justify it, that's a pretty good idea that your thinking did not originate in the Bible. You're just trying to use the Bible as a justifier of the way you think, typically so that you can tell other people they're wrong. So we don't want to do that, all right? So this subject, I think there's going to be lots of opinions on this, and I think probably a lot of disagreements, all right? And we'll see. We'll see how this goes. All right, so we're in Genesis chapter 4. Go ahead and turn there, Genesis chapter 4. Let's jump in, all right? And I know I didn't give you, I just kind of teased where we're going. I didn't give you the actual subject, okay? I'm trying, well, I know for the church members, you hopefully you'll continue to listen, even if I didn't do a little tease there. But for those who may be tuning in live, now they have to continue to listen if they really want to know what the subject is. So see, I didn't give the subject away at the beginning, all right? Here we go. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And we'll stop right there. Okay. And we started building our outline last time. And the first point in our outline is 2 sons. Remember, I said there's this idea of 2, and that I'm going to kind of see how far I can get with this. Well, that one's easy. 2 sons, Cain and Abel. And we spent a lot of time looking at their name. Cain is the idea of acquire, possession. Eve, I now possess a man from the Lord. We talked about all of that, what that could possibly reference. I cannot review everything. Then Abel, his name meant breath or vanity. So we had this kind of idea that she thought she had acquired or possessed a man from the Lord, but by the time Abel comes along, it's almost like Eve is, her opinions have changed a little bit. She's a little cynical here. Okay, now I have a child. Okay, breath, vain, meaningless. You're like, whoa, Mom, thank you for such a wonderful name. Now, it does ultimately demonstrate the brevity of life. We talked about that in Abel because he's going to be killed by his brother Cain. The brevity of life. And then the vanity of life. It appears at times that there's a vanity in life, a meaninglessness in life. You live, you die, what do you really accomplish? And we looked at some scriptures that carry this idea there. Now keep that in mind. This brevity of life and this vanity of life. Keep this in mind, because I think this is foundational to what's about the subject that's about to be presented to us in a way that we may not even think about, all right? So we have the 2 sons, we have their names, we have what they represent, but just keep this idea, brevity of life and vanity of life. This idea that in one aspect, I mean, clearly, in one aspect, there's no denying it. Life is short. We're here, we're gone. It's like a breath, which just, before you know it, it's over. And then there's a vanity, almost a futility, a meaninglessness in it. And we talked about that, and we looked up some scriptures. Now, so we go from the two sons, and now we go back to Genesis chapter 4. Now let's read this again, starting in verse 1. And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. All right, let's read this again. Again, she bare his brother Abel. Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Now, this brings us to the idea of two jobs. We have the two sons, and they have two very different jobs. Now, this is where we're going to be, I think this is fair. Now, in some ways, the subject had already been introduced earlier in the book of Genesis, and we didn't really deal with it there. But I think now we can, because you could argue that when the subject was first introduced, it was introduced in the context of being in the garden. Then it was kind of introduced a little bit in the context of the curse. And then it was introduced here in the context of life after the curse, after the fall. And that is the subject of work. Two jobs leads us now to considering and thinking about the subject of work. And we're going to explore that. We'll start our exploration by looking at a commentary on this section. We're gonna talk about it, and then we'll probably expand our search into the Bible dictionary that I have here. We're going to look at some scripture. I don't know if I'm going to turn this into an assignment for the Bible Institute, but it's definitely a subject that it would be interesting to get everyone's thoughts and opinions on it. So let's see how one commentary handled this section, all right? Adam certainly taught his sons why they worked. All right, now that's interesting, okay? According to this, it was part of God's creation mandate, and they were co-laborers with God. Now, they cite Genesis chapter 1. Go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. All right, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. They go 26 all the way to 31, all right? So let's look at this. Genesis chapter 1. Yeah. I'm just interested in the way they're going to handle this, but we'll look at this, all right? We'll look at a lot of different scriptures here. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Okay. And God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. All right, so there's the dominion concept. Now, does the dominion concept come into play with the idea of work? Okay, how does this ultimately... Now, the commentary is arguing that Adam teaches, obviously taught Cain and Abel why they worked. Right? And they're arguing it was part of God's creation mandate. All right? And they were co-laborers with God. All right, here they're created in the image of God. They have dominion. All right? Verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life. I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. All right. I know I see the dominion to subdue it, to replenish it. And I guess they're trying to argue that this was kind of the initial setting up the idea of work, right? Now, the two sons obviously they have two different jobs, but it relates to the subject of work. So does the idea of work really originate there in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 31? I don't know. If we go to, let's see here. If we go to verse 19, let's see here. If we go to Genesis chapter 2, Genesis chapter 2. And if we go to verse 15, Genesis 2:15, and the Lord God took the man, put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Now, there, I think we can get the idea of possibly now work. God puts the man in the garden to dress it and to keep it. All right. Now, okay, that fits a dominion. Okay, that's a part of it. Subdue it, maybe. All right. But to dress it and to keep it, that's very work-related language. So God puts him there. And I guess what they want us to really realize is that, in a sense, this idea of work predates the fall, right? In other words, work is not a result of the fall. Work is something God gave man to do before the fall. Now, how do we develop a biblical understanding of this subject? Well, let's see where this goes. So we have at least the initial idea of work right there. Then he gives him the commands in verse 16 and 17 in chapter 2 about what not to eat. And then if they do this, the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him. Verse 19, Genesis 2:19, out of the ground of the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. Now, was that a part of his job in the keeping and the dressing of the garden? Was the naming a part of his job, or is it just something God just let him do? We could get into a discussion there. All right. Adam names everything, realizes that he has found no helpmeet for him. God causes him to sleep, forms the woman. Okay, and then that's really all we have in chapter 2. That's really all we have in chapter 2. Then we get to chapter 3. Obviously, we have the sin that takes place, and then we have the curse. All right, and let's see. This is what it says in chapter 3, verse 17. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake, and sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In thy sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, from dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. All right? So, from the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread. All right, now, here raises this whole question about work. I'm going to throw a lot of different statements and questions at you. Okay, so here we go. Was work, the concept of work, established prior to the fall? It seems that it was. He puts them in the garden to tend, to keep it, to dress it. They name the animals. Is that a part of it? He creates a helpmeet for him. Is the helpmeet there to do the work, the keeping and the dressing? Is that what she's there for, to be a helpmeet too? Possibly. Now, if work was established prior to the fall, and there's a lot of discussion about this, then are we to view work as something that God designed man to do. In other words, is Genesis 2 really giving us a doctrine of work? Or do we read in it and we're like, look, he gave Adam something to do, so work is something we're all supposed to do. Now, in Genesis 3, some have read it to almost describe work as being a part of the curse, or is Genesis 3 saying, hey, that work that I gave you, now that work is going to become more difficult because of the curse. So now there's going to be difficulty in work, and that's the result of the curse. It's not that the work is the curse, the difficulty in it. I think most people, that's how they would read it. But the commentary is establishing that work was established by God before the fall, and that Adam taught his sons about work prior to it. All right. I think we could draw some statements and say we can agree with all of that. Let's see where else they go with this. All right, here we go. According to this commentary, work isn't a punishment from God because of sin. All right, work isn't a punishment from God because of sin. For Adam had work to do in the garden before he and his wife yielded to Satan's temptation. The biblical approach to work is that we are privileged to cooperate with God by using his creation gifts for the good of people and the glory of God. Now let's stop right here. Okay. This is establishing a theological approach to work. And the theological approach to work is whatever work you have, right? That you are to view it as something that God calls us to participate in. We are to, in a sense, work with God. We work for God. We work in order to glorify God. We work in order to serve others. And we should approach that work in a God-glorifying way. In other words, according to what this commentary is arguing, that Christians should think and have a biblical understanding and a biblical approach to the idea of work that should be drastically different than the idea of work as it relates or how other people in the world perceive it. Now, this is very important, all right? Now, I know you may not perceive this to be, and I know we're currently live on the air, but give me 1 second because I think someone's about to walk into the church. I know this is going to be weird, but we're live on the air, and I think someone's about to walk into the building. Yes, this is going to be interesting. All right. Give me 1 second. I hate to do this. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to pull up something here really quick. If I can pull up the file. Here we go. I'm going to play this while I go find out what's going on at our front door. All right, 1 second.
Chapter 4. And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother?
All right. That was interesting. Okay. You never know what's going to happen when your church is in the middle of nowhere. Okay. Yes, someone, showed up here asking for Pastor Patrick, which there's no Pastor Patrick here. So I don't know who they're looking for. Don't know what they're looking for, but there we go. So now I want to start completely over, but I can't because we're live on the air. So, all right. That was interesting, but hey, it's all situated. It's all done. So now I have to get myself back in the right frame of mind to work through this. Get it? I got to work through this. Get it? Get it? Because we're talking about work. Get it? Wasn't that funny? Wasn't that hilarious? Okay. I'm going to have someone come up here when I'm live streaming just to stand at the door, just to say, hey, no, I've had people come in here because of a storm. I've had people come in here looking for a different pastor. So I should have just said, I'm Pastor Patrick, have a seat. Okay. That's probably what I should have done. No, that probably wouldn't have been right. All right. So let's get back to this. All right. So the subject of work, what we are seeing in this commentary, and I think most people would agree, and this is very important, is that work was established prior to the fall, and that work is not a result of the fall, but the difficulty in work is what derives from the fall. But this is very, 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 very important. All right. And this is what I really want to stress. I think many Christians have a certain perspective about work, and they convince themselves that their view is biblical, and they will say, well, see, God ordained work, so you should have a certain attitude about work. And I think in many cases that attitude they have about work is not necessarily biblical. It's based off how they were raised. In other words, they'll talk about a work ethic. You can have a traditional work ethic. You can have a work ethic that derives from the way you were raised or derived from the generation in which you came from, or you can have a biblical work ethic. A lot of people like to convince themselves that their work ethic is biblical, but is it biblical or is it based off just the way you were brought up and just the way you think? And yet you pat yourself on the back going, I've got the biblical worldview. Look at all of those young people. They don't. Okay, that's easy to think that way. But what's the right way to look at it? Well, let's consider some of the scriptures they give us here. Let me read this statement again. The biblical approach to work is that we are privileged to cooperate with God by using his creation gifts for the good of people and the glory of God. So if we go with what they're saying here, they're arguing that the biblical approach to work is to see work as a cooperation with God, that we are working with God, we are working for God by using his creation gifts for the good of people and the glory of God. That means, according to this, if we go with this approach, that when you have to see your work, it's not about getting a position, not about getting a paycheck, but about cooperating with God in order to serve other people and to glorify God. Now people can convince themselves, well, I'm working hard and I want that position and I'm going to get that position and I want a raise and I need to make money so that I can save for the future and I can provide for my kids. Okay, is that a biblical approach? Or I'm working with God because I'm cooperating with God so that I can glorify God in this job and serve others. Serving others or serving self? Do you see your job as the ability to serve self? Or, now you may disguise it. Oh, I'm trying to serve my family. I'm trying to get money for my family. Okay. Is there not a self-interest there? Like how do you approach this? I think we have to ask ourselves some tough questions. Let's look at the scriptures they provide here. Let's look at some scriptures they provide here. The first one they give us is Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. All right, man, this Sunday morning is off to a great start, right? Okay. Oh, man. Oh, you don't understand how difficult it is. You have no idea how difficult this is for me to continue. I want to just delete this. I don't want to use this. But then if I don't use it, then I got to reteach this again for the Bible Institute. You don't understand how hard it is for me. You don't understand. My brain right now is so irritated and so frustrated because it did not go the right way. You don't even understand. All right. Colossians chapter 3, verse 22. You don't understand how irritated I webcam right now. I'm putting a smile on my face and faking it all day long. Here we go. Colossians chapter 3, verse 22. Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh. Now let's stop right here. Now this is a controversial passage. And the reason this is controversial is it's dealing with servants. It's probably dealing with the concept of a slave. Now, is it acceptable to apply this to employer relationship? I think that's probably somewhat acceptable, but we just got to understand it's very controversial, and it offers a mindset that, I don't even know how we apply, especially to history, but okay. So servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh. So a lot of people talk about having a good work ethic. All right. Well, a good work ethic here seems to be obedience to the ones in charge, a submission to the ones in charge. How submissive, how obedient are you to those in charge? All right. That's a tough question. Not with eye service as man pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. All right. Now, here's the idea. So if a biblical work ethic, seems to let's try to write this out. Let's try to build this. Let's try to write this out and build up a biblical view of work. It seems to be a biblical view of work is seeing work as a cooperation with God, and that you're working in order to serve others and to glorify God. All right, let's go with that. So you see work as a cooperation with God to serve others and to glorify God. Now, this would speak of any kind of work, the work that, now I know this is controversial in 2020, but the work the wife is supposed to do, right? She is to see that work as she is cooperating with God to serve others and to glorify God in that work. That can be everything from cooking to cleaning, whatever those responsibilities the wife perceives as her responsibility, not to get into that whole argument in 2020, because someone said, no, that's the wrong way to look at it. Oh, that's, patriarchy. Take down the patriarchy. That's, that's wrong. You're telling the woman that's what her place is. I'm saying whatever the work is, she has to perceive it as a cooperation with God to serve others and to glorify God. Next, whatever work situation you're in, there has to be a submissiveness to the authority. All right. And it doesn't talk about how if the authority is good or if the authority is bad, because here it has servants as obeying. That would be the slave obeying the master. All right. Not with an eye service. So you don't do it with an eye service as man pleasers. You're not doing the job to please people. You're not doing the job to please your boss. You're not doing the job to please others, because to do the job to please others, if you do a job in order to try to please others, listen, you're not. That's not a biblical ethic. That's not a biblical world. That's not a biblical worldview. That's not a biblical work ethic. You can't do it in order to please people. You have to do it in order to please God. All right. Let's continue. Fearing God. The fear of God should be the driving, motivating factor in how you do your work, is that you fear God. That should be the determining, motivating factor. And then continue, verse 23. Whatsoever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men. You are to do everything, all of your work, heartily. There should be a dedication to it. There should be a commitment to it. There should be such a level of work and a way you approach it with the right attitude, but because you're doing it you're doing it for men, you're doing it as unto the Lord. That's a completely different perspective. Now, what a lot of Christians do is they pat themselves up. Well, I work hard, like, if I'm going to put in a full day's work for a full day's pay, right? And they state it that way. Okay, it's more than just patting yourself on the back and you're proud of yourself because you've got the right view of work and all these lazy people don't. No. It's not about other people. It's not about you worrying about other people. It's not about you patting yourself on the back that you work more than other people, because you're working for God. You're not working so that you can brag about how well you work. You work with God in mind. You don't work with other people in mind. It's not about what other people think. It's not about what other people perceive or what about other people do. It's irrelevant. You are so focused on working for God, other people are irrelevant to the situation. It's hard to have that mindset because you're at work, you worry about what everyone else is doing. All right. And why do we do this? We knowing that of the Lord you shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Jesus. But he that doeth wrong shall receive the wrong which he hath done, and there is no respect of persons. Bottom line is you work to please God. You work to serve God. You work to be rewarded by God. That's what you do. You don't work for anyone else. You don't you worry about anybody else. And if you're preoccupied with what everyone else does and preoccupied with how other people work or how little they work, I think that's literally a wrong mindset. It doesn't matter. You're there to focus on pleasing God and serving God. All right? So that's a very important concept here to develop this out, because we need the right mindset here. Now, again, the way we got here is these two children, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, they've got jobs. They've got work to do. And the argument is that Adam taught them about work based off what he did so. So how do we understand this? Well, then how were they to work? They were to work in what way? They were to work in a way realizing they're cooperating with God. They're there to serve. There's not really a lot of people around, but they're there to glorify God. They're there to obey God, glorify God, and they are to be submissive to God, right? And they would have been submissive, obviously, to their parents. That would have been their responsibility if we're carrying this biblical idea out. Let's see another scripture they have here. Go to 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. First Thessalonians chapter 4. First Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 11. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 11. And that you study to be quiet and to do your own business and to work with your own hands as we commanded you, that you may walk honestly towards them that are without, and that you may have lack of nothing. All right. This is just the idea of work is here, and that the people at Thessalonica they're being told to do their own business, to work with their own hands as we've commanded them, that they may walk honestly and that they may they have a lack of nothing. So this is the idea of work. Now you could argue it's a work in order to obtain or to work in such a way that you don't lack anything, to work in such a way that you don't need anything. You could possibly draw a correlation there. Now, this would really create a certain kind of mindset about work, but okay. All right. The commentary continues on. Work in the will of God isn't a curse. It's a blessing. All right. So this is the idea that work in the will of God isn't a curse, it's a blessing. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, Exodus chapter 20, verse 9, was as much a part of God's law for Israel as his command to rest on the Sabbath day. The Bible has nothing good to say about the idleness or about the idle people who expect others to provide for them. All right. Now they want us to look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. This is where I thought the first one was headed. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. And they want us to read, verse 6 through 15. Let's read it. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 6 through 15. Now we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that ye withdraw yourselves from every brother that walketh disorderly, and not after the tradition which he received of us. For yourselves know ye ought to follow us, for we behave not ourselves disorderly among you. All right, say, hey, you need to have listened to us. You need to follow the traditions we've given us. This is Paul trying to tell the people at Thessalonica, hey, look, there's a way you need to be acting, and you're not, and that you are to follow us, and that you are to withdraw yourself from anyone who's not following what we've taught you. All right, pretty straightforward. Now, what does this have to do with work? Verse 8. All right, 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 8. Neither did we eat any man's bread for naught, but wrought with labor and travail night and day, that we may not be chargeable to any of you. Not because we have not power, but to make ourselves an ensample unto you to follow us. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if anyone would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Now them that are such as we commanded and exhort by our Lord Jesus Christ, that with quietness they work and eat their own bread. But ye, brethren, be not weary in well-doing. And if any man obey not our word by his epistle, note that man and have no company with him, that he may be ashamed. Yet count him not as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. So here's the biblical idea, is that you are to work. That work is something you are supposed to do. And if you don't work, you don't eat. It seems to be the idea that work is commanded by God. It is a good thing. We are to have a biblical perspective of it. And then if you don't work, you don't eat. Now, this raises questions. How do we balance this out? Because there are other passages of the Bible that clearly seems to indicate that we help those in need. Now, do we help those in need by saying we're not going to help you unless you work? Or is this just what he's trying to tell the believers at Thessalonica is there was a problem, there was a deeper, do we have to understand this? And because a lot of people rip this out of context and try to apply it to work. Is this fit into a bigger context? There were those, remember in the church at Thessalonica, there was a major issue with how they were perceiving the coming of the Lord. Like he was about to come back, or maybe some thought they may have already missed his return. And was there not possibly this idea that, hey, Christ is coming, we don't need to do anything. We're just going to sit here and not do anything. We're going to be idle. And this idleness was leading to being busybodies, was probably leading to other possible sinful things. And he's like, hey, guys, no, you've got to work. And if you're not going to work, then you don't eat, because you need to be contributing and not just sitting here taking from other people because you believe, Christ is about to return, or that kind of concept. Maybe there was a bigger issue at hand. Some people will rip this verse out of context and look at anyone who's in need and say, I'm not going to help you unless you work. I don't know if that's fair to the text. I think what we can say is that work is clearly ordained by God. We are to participate in it with a right biblical mindset. And if we violate that, then we're violating the concept of work. All right. Now, let's see if the commentary has anything else to say here in regards to this. All right. They go on and say this. Before Jesus began his public ministry, Jesus labored as a carpenter. And when he wasn't traveling or preaching, the Apostle Paul worked as a tent maker. Acts chapter 18, verses 1 through 3. As Christians, we don't work simply to pay our bills and provide for our needs. We work because it's God's ordained way for us to serve him and others, and thereby glorify God in our lives. So again, We don't work in order to pay our bills. We don't work in order to get. We work in order to serve others and to glorify God. That's the emphasis the commentary is making. We work in order to glorify God. We work with God in mind. Any other view of work begins to disrupt that and break that down. Or put it this way, it stops being a biblical view of work. The biblical view of work is we're cooperating with God, we're serving others, and we're to glorify God. We are to submit to the authority. We're to submit to the authority. We are to work with the idea of pleasing God and not pleasing others. And that this is the mindset we have to carry on. And that the lack of work or not working and idleness can lead to being a busybody, and it can lead to you having to be dependent on other people or other people being responsible for trying to take care of you, which is not the biblical approach to work, right? The biblical approach to work is not other people work and you don't have to do anything, all right? That's not the right one. But again, the focus is on glorifying God. We don't work just to make a living. We work to make a life, to develop our God-given abilities, and to seek to increase the quality and quantity of our labor. Martin Luther told the dairymaids that they could milk cows to the glory of God. All right, that's the idea. No matter what you're doing, you're to do that work in order to glorify God. You don't clean the house to clean the house. You clean the house to glorify God. You don't cook to feed people. You cook to glorify God. You don't go to your job to do your job. Go to your job to glorify God. Theodore Roosevelt said that the best prize that life offers is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. Perhaps the boys asked their father why their work was so difficult, and Adam had to explain that God had cursed the ground because of his own disobedience. And the sweat of your face you shall eat bread was God's sentence, Genesis 3:17 through 19. And there was no escape, but this question gave Adam the opportunity to remind his son of God's promise of a redeemer and a day when creation would be set free from the bondage of sin. Now, I don't know if they asked that question or not. I have no clue. But we know this. They have two jobs. Go back to Genesis 4. And we can see how these two jobs came to pass and what these two jobs were, all right? She bare his brother Abel, all right? And here we go, Genesis chapter 4, verse 2. Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground, all right? Those are the two jobs. Abel was a keeper of the sheep. Cain was a tiller of the ground. Those are the two jobs they have. All right? Now remember, the focus is supposed to be that they're doing those jobs for what purpose? To glorify God and to serve others. That is the purpose. Well, obviously you can see how keeping the sheep and tilling the ground is serving others, obviously, because the family would need sheep and they would need what's grown from the ground. So both jobs would be doing that. Now, the key is they're supposed to be doing those jobs and in order to glorify God. And that may lead to the next part, but we'll just stay right here because I don't want to just move to another subject and get past this idea of work. So I'm just going to throw out a lot of random thoughts here. I want to go to the Bible dictionary, but I don't really have time. So let's think about this. There's a lot of discussion. There used to be a lot of discussion. I felt like maybe I heard a lot of it on Christian radio in the 1990s, maybe a little bit in the 2000s. I haven't heard much discussion about it in modern times, or in current times, I should say. And I think if you go back and read the Puritans, go back and read a lot of older commentaries, there was a constant reminder of having a biblical perspective on the subject of work. I feel that as time has moved forward, that the church may still speak of work, but they almost do so with almost a cultural or generational view of work, not necessarily a biblical view of work. And we have to ensure that we pull out of our thinking of work, we pull out of it anything that's not from the Bible. So let's throw out a couple of things. When it comes to the subject of work in the Bible, I struggle a lot with this, because to me, I think in some ways the Bible is very contradictory. And you'll see what I mean by that. I said seems to be. I didn't say it is. I said it seems to be. And here's the reason why. We've already looked in Genesis chapter 4 that Abel's name gives us the idea that life is short. And in Genesis chapter 4, it also seems to show you the vanity of this life. So if you sit back and look at it from a biblical perspective, life is short. And there's a vanity to it in some way, shape, or form. In other words, if you just look at it from a human perspective, all the things you do and all the things you accomplish, you're going to die. What does it ultimately matter? All the things that you think matter today, it's not going to matter tomorrow. I've told you the story a million times. In the military, I would watch it over and over and over. Here's someone who dedicated 20 years of their life, 22 years of their life, 24 years of their life to work, going to work, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, depending on the military, what your work schedule is, maybe working 6 days a week, 7 days a week, whatever the case may be. You do all of this work and you go through all the turmoil and the politics and the arguing and the disagreeing and the controversies and all the difficulties that arise in work week after week after week after week after week after week. Everyone acting like this is the most important thing in the history of mankind. And then the person retires and they do the whole big retirement ceremony that I refuse to have. They go through the whole thing. Everyone stands up and says all the supposed, great words about how wonderful the person was. They talked garbage about them the whole time they worked with them, but that's okay. It's retirement ceremony time. So we got to say good words. You get some kind of retirement gift. The military, you get a shadow box to remember all of your supposed accomplishments you made in the military. I don't know. You keep all your medals. Who knows? You get a flag, all that stuff you do in the retirement ceremony. And everybody claps. There's a cake. Everybody's woo. Oh, congratulations. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And then, and I've said it so many times, every time I was forced to go to retirement ceremonies because they usually made me go, I'd be like, I don't want to go, but I would have to go. Or usually I would volunteer to, I'll work the front desk and take care of patients if they come in. Everybody, you go to the retirement ceremony. But if I knew one was happening, the second it was over, I would run to either the third floor of the hospital, second floor of the hospital, whatever floor of the hospital I could get to that was high up, overlooking kind of the entrance and exit, the main entrance and exit of the hospital, knowing that's where the person was going to possibly walk out. I would always run up and look at when the people walked out. And you could just see almost as they walked out, there was almost this looking back, kind of like it's over. That's done. You're done. And you're not going back there. And then I would run back downstairs and just look at how quick the person is forgotten. Like literally, usually within minutes, their office is already taken over. Somebody's already moving into their office. Someone now has their position. And within a week or two, they're gone. They're done. Nobody remembers you. Nobody cares what you accomplished. All those medals you got, nobody cares. Nobody cares at all. All your accomplishments, things that you work to create, you're not even remembered as creating them. You're done. You're not even, you're finished. I know that at the hospital on base, I had to create the whole survey that was done, that after you have an appointment, they would call you and ask you certain questions about your experience. Did you get your medication? Did the doctor do this? I created all of those questions. I created that entire system. Guess what? If they still call people after an appointment today at the 7th Medical Group at Dyess Air Force Base, nobody there knows I created. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. I'm irrelevant. It doesn't matter. I can go back and look at all kinds of things that I may have set up and did. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It died. In fact, even after I created it and I was still there, nobody cared. So it's like there is a vanity to it. There is a meaninglessness to it. There's no way to get around it. You work and you can take all the pride in it. You can pat yourself on the back thinking that you're doing such a great job. Nobody cares. your perception of how valuable it is it's your own perception. And so I've always felt that the whole idea of work is like life is short and you spend 8-9 hours a day there where you're going to die. You don't even know when you're going to die. So you take the time you sleep, you take the time you work, and you look at a 24-hour day and you're like, well, that's not how I want to live my life. Now, whenever I say these things, people think, well, you have a very bad attitude about work and it's very ungodly. And older people usually think that, I'm, some calling for communism or socialism or something. I'm just saying that I perceive that the Bible leads me to think this way. It tells me the vanity of it. It tells me the meaninglessness of it. The Bible screams at that in the book of Ecclesiastes, that you do all of these things, it doesn't matter. It's all going to disappear. Your accomplishments are just going to be forgotten. The Bible tells me this. So that means my perception about work can't be getting caught up into all of that. That my work has to be viewed from this perspective. God ordained work, and we could argue, why did he ordain it? He ordained it because in work is how we live our life, listen, to serve others and to glorify God. And if all the other trappings of work that you get caught up in, you want that praise of men, you want those rewards, you want everyone to know you got those rewards, you want that position, you want that paycheck, you want all of that financial security, all of those things you supposedly get from work. That is literally the unbiblical way of perceiving it. And somehow we mix that way of thinking with the biblical idea. And then we look at anyone who views work as less than us as if, well, they're the unbiblical kind. I think we have enough wrong thinking in Christians' way of thinking about work that we need to look to ourselves before we condemn everyone else. And before you look down on, well, those young people, they don't have a good work ethic. Well, okay, maybe they don't have a biblical work ethic. Well, if they don't have a biblical work ethic, guess what? They need salvation. They just don't need your biblical view of work. Right. And because what a lot of older people do is, well, they just have a bad attitude about work. They don't want to work. They don't like to work. They're lazy. Well, that's more of a generational thing you're having a problem with. Right. The issue is the biblical worldview. Here, the biblical worldview of work is about, guess what? Your view of work. It's for the Christian. Don't expect the lost person to have the biblical view of work. They shouldn't have it because they need Christianity before they develop a biblical view of work. All right. And it's just, I think sometimes Christians, look down on everyone else's perception of work. Well, you've got to look in the mirror and make sure your view of work is really biblical. Do you see work as you are cooperating with God to serve other people and to glorify him? You submit to authority. You don't work to get praised by men. You don't work to get rewarded by men. You don't work for everyone to think you're great. You work in order to glorify God. That's all you're concerned with. Did you glorify God in your work? Now, if you're preoccupied with what everyone did or did not do, I will argue that you're more focused on how work impacts you, how it affects you. And we are all guilty of that. We go to work, and because certain things happen, we get upset because it affects us, and because we become preoccupied with self, and our view is not God-focused in our work, it's self-focused. It's not eternally focused, it's temporal. It's focused on the temporal. It's focused on the here and now. Adam obviously had to instruct the boys about work. They have these two jobs: keeper of the sheep, tiller of the ground. Keeper of the sheep, tiller of the ground. And what's interesting is from their work is going to lead to what happens? 2 offerings, right? We've got 2 boys, 2 jobs, 2 offerings, which is going to get to 2 reactions. Now, the 2 offerings come from their work. I want you to see that. The 2 offerings are offerings produced from their work. One's going to bring of the sheep. The other one's going to bring of the things produced from the ground. Why? Because this is to illustrate that the work is for God. It is to glorify God. It is to be God-focused. The work is to be focused upon God. How does that impact your life? That is the question that you have to figure it out. It doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. If you're a college student, your job is therefore to go to school. If you're in high school, it doesn't matter what middle school, it doesn't matter, elementary school. If you're a Christian, you do your work not for your own, and it's hard to not view college this way. You're getting that degree for your own advancement. I understand that, but you're getting advancement to get a job, but you're getting that job for what purpose? It's built into our DNA to view, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get a degree, I'm going to get a job, because if I get a job, then I can make X amount of money, and then I can do this and I can do that. We are so preoccupied with self in it that we don't ever perceive, how can I glorify God and serve others in my going to school? And then how am I going to glorify God in it? I think as Christians, we throw that as a tagline. Why do I go to work? To glorify God. What am I supposed to do with my job? Glorify God. I think we know we're supposed to say it. We know we're supposed to say it. What is the chief end of man? To glorify God and enjoy him forever. We know the right answer. How does that impact your job? And this leads to the important question. We already know what's going to happen in Genesis 4. One of these offerings are going to be accepted. One of them are going to be straight up rejected, right? Straight up rejected. Now, what we have a tendency to do is focus on the type of offering offered. And we're like, well, one offered the right thing, the other offered the wrong thing. I don't know if that's why one is rejected and one is accepted. I think the problem is one has God in mind. One is focused on God and the other one isn't focused on God. He's just going through the motions. He's doing the work. He's doing what he's supposed to do in the offering, but God is not the focus. And I think that that's the issue, that this screams at us about how we approach our work. Think of it this way. Do you approach work as an act of worship? Do you approach work as an act of worship? Right? And I think I have a very important quote here that I want to end with. I think I wrote it down. Give me 1 second. I think I have it here. Yes, this is this is the quote I wrote down. Workers need to be worshipers or they may become idolaters. Workers need to be worshipers or they may become idolaters. Workers need to be worshipers or they may become idolaters. They will begin to focus on the gifts, not the giver. They will begin to focus on what they get, not what they can give. They will begin to focus on self and not on the Creator. Workers need to be worshipers or they may become idolaters. I will say it this way. Workers need to be worshipers. And when I say that you don't consider yourself a worker, consider yourself a worshiper. Like we think we come to church to worship, but actually you go to work to worship, and you worship in how you do your work and what you're doing your work for. You're to be worshiping God in the work. If you focus on the work and not on God, then guess what? You'll either become so self-consumed about your own position, your money, and what you can get, or you'll become, and I think this depends on how you think, and this would always be my problem, I would just become, this whole thing, this whole endeavor is useless and a waste of time and vanity, meaningless. That's how I've always perceived it. My attitude about work is, wait, this whole system is dumb. Okay, so, all right, someone sets a price, then I have to work so that I can give them money, and then they have to work so that they can get money. So we just have this entire system that's set up so that I have to spend half of my life going to work so that I can get the money, so that I can get the things I need. And then if I want more, I got to work more so that I can get some of the things I want. Because those things cost, and because those things cost, they have to have money. And it's like this whole system, it's this circular system to engage us in the most futile activity. Like we have this, it's like here's sand in the sand glass. Here's like the sand in the hourglass, right? Here it is. And it's pouring out. And I'm like, look how much sand there is. There's not a lot of sand there. Yeah, but you can go ahead and take about half of that sand and just go ahead and take it out of the hourglass. Just go ahead and take it out. Why? Why are you going to? Because there's not a lot there. Well, you got to take that because you got to work. I got to work for what? So that you can get things. But I get things. Well, you get some things. You can get some things you enjoy. But how am I going to enjoy them when half of my sand just went to work? Oh, that seems vain. That seems useless. That's taking away my time. That's taking away my life. And whatever I accomplish isn't really going to matter. Nobody's going to care 5 seconds after I'm gone. Right? It's the same thing about, I used to say in regards to high school, all that garbage everyone does in high school that they think means so much. It was a waste of time and uselessness. So I've always perceived the vanity in it, the meaninglessness in it, because I'm like, I've got a limited amount of hours. I've got a limited amount of time, and I don't want it going for work. Nobody lays on their deathbed going, I wish I would have worked a couple of more extra days, just like no one lays on their deathbed wishing they would have slept a couple of more hours. So I see the vanity in it. So for me, if I don't approach work as worship, I'm just going to become disillusioned and hate it. And I did. I hated going to work because I wanted to be doing other things. I had to perceive, you have to go to worship, not to work. Others, so I think for me, it leads to disillusionment, frustration, bitterness, anger. For others, if you don't approach work as worship, you will approach it as a form of idolatry or as a way to serve self. Like ultimately, you're seeing it to get for what you want. Well, that creates an unbiblical approach. Are you a worshiper or are you a worker? We have work in order to worship. And if we work without worship, we become nothing more than self-serving idolaters. That is the biblical approach to work. Cain and Abel both work. They're supposed to be worshipers. But I think what we're going to see is one was the worshiper, the other one wasn't. So one's worship is accepted, the other one is rejected, which I think says everything, that work and worship is tied together. Worship and work is to be tied together. I do not have for you the answer and how to approach your work as an act of worship. I never figured it out perfectly. It's easy to figure it out, like what I'm doing here for this job, right? Okay, I'm teaching the Bible. That's easy. But other jobs, no. Now I did have a good mindset of I work to serve others, because in the medical world, I was all about taking care of the patient, and fought with the medical world because most of the time the medical world act like the patient was a nuisance instead of what we're supposed to be doing. So I got that part down. That part I got down. But I still almost cried every time I had to wake up and go to work. I almost I don't want to go to work. It's 9 hours of being at work. There's 9 million other things I want to do. And I usually cried like a baby. But now when I got there, I always tried to make the best of it. But I didn't always say, hey, I'm here to worship God today. All right, I'll stop right there. All right. There you have it. What a messed up hour. And that did not go the way I wanted it to go. So there you go. So now, there. I don't know what else to say. There you have it. You can give me your thoughts on worship and work. newsif@yahoo.com. Church members, you can put something there. I do apologize for that interruption. That really threw me off my game the rest of the teaching. I know it probably didn't come across that. I mean, I was so, part of my brain is sitting there going, man, right in the middle of this, I had to stop and play Genesis 4 being read. What a complete disaster. So hopefully in the next hour will go better. All right, there you have it. That concludes this session of the Bible Institute, trying to build a biblical doctrine of work. We didn't even get into the Bible Dictionary's definition of work. We probably could expand on this, but I think that at least introduces the subject, and we could probably, we're going to be confronted with the subject as we move on through the Bible. So we'll definitely be returning to this at some point. All right. Thanks for listening. God bless.